You have to get used to disappointment, which is why I'm so grateful for the Boys Choir of Harlem, which taught me you can work your behind off and not get something. And I was working. And but here's the thing, the beauty of this business is you just need one yes to change everything. It's like winning the lottery. You just need that one yes. You don't need to go yes all the time. You just need, everybody's not Sam Jackson. You just need that one yes that changes your entire existence.
Welcome to the AttractionPros podcast, where we discuss the latest trends and challenges facing the attractions industry today.
We chat with some of the top leaders in the field and provide resources that will help develop your career in this great industry.
I am Josh Liebman. I am obsessed with the guest experience and helping attractions make that their top priority for success.
And I'm Matt Heller. I am passionate about organizational effectiveness, leadership development, and employee engagement.
Now sit upright, hold on tight, and get ready for the AttractionPros podcast.
Hey, Josh, how are you?
Hey, Matt, I am really excited for today's guest. But first, before we get to that, how are you?
I am more than fantastic, especially considering today's guest. But I have a question for you.
Okay.
Have you ever wanted to run away and join the circus?
Of course. Absolutely. Who hasn't? You know, when I was 11 years old, I taught myself how to juggle. And I was like, all right, like, this is it. Like, I can juggle. Like, what next? I need to learn to ride a unicycle. Last night, my wife and I were watching Modern Family, and Phil Dunphy is learning how to tightrope in his front yard. And I'm like, yeah, like, I want to learn to do that.
Yeah.
The amazing talents and skills seen in the circus are nothing short of aspiring. What about you?
I don't know that I've ever said, hey, I want to run away and join the circus, but I've always been fascinated by the spectacle of it, certainly of the traveling component. I love to travel. I love to, I think being in a seasonal business, I've always loved that process of closing down and then building back up. And the circus does that all the time. And then traveling as a community, that has always been something that's really been fascinating to me. But I don't know that I've ever said those words, I want to run away and join the circus. But now that you've mentioned your skill, can you still juggle?
I can still juggle, but all the other things I mentioned, I can't quite do.
Oh, okay. Well, that all ties into our guest today, Jonathan Lee Iverson, also known as the Last Ringmaster, has a long career with Ringling Bros, now is with Omnium. And to just listen to him talk, it's not just about being in the ring and being the ringmaster of a circus. There's so much more depth to what he brings to the table. And I've just been inspired by everything that he had to say.
100%. I think the word inspired, it probably best sums up what this interview was. Just from the impact that he's had on people's lives, the impact that other people have had on his life, living in that community with he even talks about just the train. That was their home, and they lived on that and worked together, and the social environment, the family dynamic of all of that was amazing to hear about, as well as just like we said, the impact that he has had on people's lives. I think we could go on and on about how amazing this interview was, but I would say let's just get straight to hearing it from the ringmaster himself, the last ringmaster, Jonathan Lee Iverson. Jonathan Lee Iverson, welcome to the AttractionPros podcast. We are so excited to talk to you today. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, it's absolutely our pleasure. So to get this started, can you just give us just a quick overview of your career background?
Well, it's very boring. I started out in a little dinky boy choir in New York City, the world-renowned Boys Choir of Harlem. Dinky, that would be hardly, I would never even call it that, to be honest with you. It was the great first, I always call it the first time I learned you have to actually work for something. I was 11 and I ventured into this, what I didn't know it was a world-class institution. And I thought I could just go in there and be cute and start performing, but who knew? It was a great experience. It opened up the whole world to me, the world of music, but also just culture, and just gave me this idea that there's so many different options. And so that was the Boys Choir of Harlem for me for 8 years. And I was privileged to go to LaGuardia High School of Music and Art and Performing Arts, which the legendary film Fame is based on. And then I ventured from there to the Hartt School of Music in Hartford, Connecticut, of the University of Hartford. And I was on track to become an opera singer. That's what I wanted to study and do. And I got my undergrad degree. Who knew what I was going to do with do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, right? And I was going to venture off to Europe and study there, and just, live and study and grow and, become a world famous opera singer. That was the goal. And funny thing happened on the way to an audition where I was looking for a gig to raise money so I could make that trip to Europe. I ran smack into the director of Ringling Brothers and Barnum Bailey, who so happened to be looking for, and I quote, a singing ringmaster. And I looked at him like he had 3 heads, because I knew of Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey. I didn't know what a ringmaster did. I was familiar somewhat, some guy in a top hat who made noise, I guess. But I had no idea they had an extraordinary musical legacy. That is Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey. And I never in my wildest dreams considered that to be a career that you go down. Circus people are otherworldly. They're different than us, as I would humbly find out. And, I was up against 30 other candidates. So this was a serious thing. It was one of those being in the right place at the right time type of deals. And well, obviously, that turned out to be wonderful. We made some history in the process. I became the first New Yorker, youngest, and the first Black American to hold that title in the 129 years that it existed at that time. The total of 146 years. I was with them for the very last show. And it was great. I mean, you travel all over. It's like I call it like a non-violent political campaign. That's what it feels like to be ringmaster of the greatest show on earth. Nobody's digging up stuff on you, thank goodness. It was great. I mean, wonderful, best time of my life. I see why circus people are looked at as otherworldly. You normal people are boring. It was just great, man. It was a lot of fun. When your co-workers have 5-ton elephants and 600-pound tigers, I mean, everything else is boring. I had the great privilege of working with some of the most amazing artists you'll ever find, innovative, physical bodies were just extraordinary. And I also was privileged enough to meet my wife, and we, ventured on the road together. She actually came over to this country as a dance captain via Brazil, and she worked her way up to becoming the production manager of the entire show, which meant she ran my life full time. So it was really wonderful. It was the best way. I always said I got to make a living while having a life. And so it was very enchanting. So that's me. After that, I've been doing, a bit of this, a bit of that. Like every performing artist, you have to have like 30 streams of income going at the same time. So I've done operas, I've done plays, I've done voiceover, hosting, as I did with the wonderful IAPA 2019 Expo. That was a lot of fun. It was like being in, I always tell people, if you're a kid, just imagine going to see everything wonderful you've ever imagined all in one place. And so that was a lot of fun.
Very cool. Well, Jonathan, I learned something. I done some background on you, before this, and certainly saw you at IAPA back in 2019. Did not know that you were, a professionally trained musician, and that was the path you were going to go down. I actually went to music school myself. I was going to be a music educator, and decided that was not my path. So now I do something completely different. But I take a lot of lessons from that training and from that experience. So I'm curious what sort of lessons you're taking from being an opera singer and a classically trained musician. How has that helped you be a ringmaster?
All my lessons are rooted really in the Boys Choir of Harlem. I was one of those really privileged souls that I didn't know it at the time. Of course, when you're a kid, your teachers just suck, right? They're just horrible people. And, you just can't wait to get out of that rehearsal space. But boy, the lessons that I got from there guide my life almost in everything, even in how I raise my children. It really gave me a great foundation as to knowing how to accept failure, knowing how to really use the tools that you do have, really knowing the importance of being grounded, and knowing the importance of your fundamentals. And what and so all of these things are transferable. The biggest thing, so if I could tell you, just I guess the top things are basically know your craft, work like the devil, and build relationships. Those were the three pillars of the Boys Choir of Harlem that I carry with everything, and it's transferable with everything, especially building relationships. And so when I ventured into being a ringmaster, those transferred perfectly, considering all the people I was constantly meeting, from heads of state to just the regular kid who's just there starry-eyed over what they're seeing, knowing how to handle yourself in that kind of situation. There were certain advantages. Obviously, I had good vocal training, which I needed, because, a circus performing schedule is rigorous as they come. We're talking at least 450 shows a year, always 3 show Saturdays. And these weren't little dinky showcases. Oh, how you doing, boys? These were full out productions. I never left the floor. I'm singing and announcing, plus doing interviews in between shows. All sorts of things are going on. So it was so critical that I had really great vocal training. And more importantly, I had a sort of like, growing up, I had like a work study type of training. So I wasn't just training to be a musician and training to be a singer. I was training to perform. We were always performing. So there were just instincts that were sharpened from the doing that I brought into what I was doing at Ringling Brothers, which were further enhanced, because that's a whole different animal when you have to perform with when you're performing in a show that is completely alive. And what I mean by that is anything can happen at any time. We always had a set script and choreography and you name it. We had all that stuff going, but there was never a show that I ever performed that went exactly the way it was supposed to go. And it never did. And so you have to have a supple mind. You have to be prepared to change things up on a dime, cut things out, improv, whatever. So all of that came in handy from, my training as a performer altogether.
That's really interesting. Thank you for sharing that. There was one thing that you mentioned a few minutes ago too, and that was when you said that you were up for the role of ringmaster, you were up against 30 other people. Mm-hmm. I've got to imagine that those were 30 very talented people. So curious, what set you apart? What got you above and ahead those that ended up getting you into that role?
Clearly, they weren't talented enough. I can't tell you, this business is fickle. And one of the hard lessons, and I hope there are performers out there who are listening, who are thinking about going into this business, I'm going to tell you right now, there's the large majority of your life is going to be no. You're a salesperson. So ask any salesperson, the large majority of your life is going to be no. And 9 times out of 10, it will have nothing to do with your talent. I've gone on countless auditions where it was clearly not my talent. I wasn't the size. I wasn't the type. I wasn't what they were looking for a variety of reasons. I literally had producers tell me that, like, stop me in the middle of my audition. And I'll never forget this one producer. He was shaking his head. He's like, my goodness, you would be so perfect if you weren't so tall. That's what he said. He said, you're just too big for the role. He said the leading lady who was a name in the industry, and he was like, you would be so perfect. Your voice is right. You all would blend right. You're so tall that it wouldn't, we were supposed to play romantic leads. He said, it wouldn't come across right. She looked like your daughter. And I got it. I said, okay. So, I mean, this is about, it's literally about a stubborn way of just grinding and getting out there. And you have to get used to disappointment, which is why I'm so grateful for the Boys Choir of Harlem, which taught me you can work your behind off and not get something. And I was working. And but here's the thing, the beauty of this business is you just need one yes to change everything. It's like winning the lottery. You just need that one yes. You don't need to go yes all the time. You just need, everybody's not Sam Jackson. You just need that one yes that changes your entire existence. And that's what the circus did for me. I happened to be exactly what they were looking for at the time. It was just, the right place, the right time. I was in the condition for it. And, I'm thinking, listen, it's called Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey, and I want to hit the Barnum. I mean, if we're thinking in terms of selling this show, that decision wasn't just made on my talent and my good looks. It was also made on marketability. Okay, we have a native New Yorker. New York is our biggest market, and he's got an incredible story with an institution that is very well respected and loved in New York. I mean, their PR people, I can only imagine that their press people at Feld Entertainment, Ringling Brothers, and their marketing people kind of did backflips and said, yeah, I mean, it's like the work is there. So, and then to add the historical components to it. I mean, after all, you have to remember this is always going to be a business. And business is a bigger word than show. And so I think that really factored into the decisions. And quite frankly, it proved correct because we broke records upon that. I mean, they had a stellar media campaign for me. I mean, I was famous for a good year and a half. I was like, man, I was all over the place. It was great. But I really got to understand, okay, this is how this stuff works. So a lot of things go into it. It takes a village. It really takes a village. And I think that's what happens when it goes into the decision-making as to who a person wants or what have you, when it comes down to, picking a talent for a particular production.
Yeah, it's just fascinating how that all works out. And I love how you say you just need one yes, right? And then that's when your training and your personality kick in to take advantage of whatever opportunity is in front of you. So I just love that part of the story. Also interesting that you were literally the last ringmaster, right? You were at the last show for Ringling. But now there's kind of rumblings that the circus might be coming back. So can you walk us through that? What does that mean? And, are we really getting the Ringling Brothers Circus back?
From what I'm hearing, that appears to be the case. And so I'll be the last ringmaster with an asterisk. And listen, look, of course, obviously, just as a performing artist, I think anything where, you'll have more performers out there working and show people working, and that means crew and all the things that go with it, I'm all for it. So obviously, I think it's exciting news that they're preparing to bring it back. I wish they didn't take us through the emotional toll of closing it 4 years ago, but it's what it is. And I understood why they had to close it 4 years ago. I mean, the business just was not doing well. And I think they also were reminded of how much it meant to the public, because we take things for granted. And when we announced back in 2017 that we were going to close, it was like we suddenly turned into the hottest ticket in the country. It was like crazy. All of a sudden, all this media, everybody wanted, like the very people who neglected us. And I kept running into people who were like in tears, grown people, like, I kept neglecting it. I was, maybe next year. And now it's like, and so I think when I saw that, I knew, okay, we'll come back at some point, because the people who run it are very smart people. And the number one superpower of a business person is being an opportunist. And they had to clearly see, okay, there's still a market for this. Because every show was sold out right after. We weren't doing very well before then. It was so weird. The shows were great. But all of a sudden we said, okay, we're not doing it anymore. And all of a sudden it was like, oh, it's like that breakup. It's like that girlfriend you keep neglecting, and she's fine, but you keep neglecting her. And then she said, okay, I'm out of here. And then all of a sudden you're begging at her door. And so that's what it turned into. And it was beautiful to see. And I always sensed it was going to come back. I always sensed it was going to come back in some way, shape, or form. I'm curious to see how they wish to do it, because I know there have been significant changes, but that's their business. I'm looking forward to it, however they cast it, however they run it. I wish nothing but the highest success for it, because, listen, I think it's necessary. It's not lost on me that upon our closing, and maybe it's because I was in this wonderland for 17 years, but upon our closing, our country went into this very ugly, ugly space. It's like we went into this ugly, divisive, grotesque space that we're still trying to work ourselves out of, where people are really stubborn about their tribes. And it's shocking to me, because I'll meet some people who are in their little tribes and they'll find out what I used to do. And I love that. And I'm thinking to myself, and do you realize that your mouth was gaped open and you were cheering for a bunch of immigrants and gay people and Black people, and you never once thought, of them being different? You just were stunned by their talent. And here it is, we can't, you can't get along with your neighbor. It's just weird to me, but that's people. I think the circus, as Ernest Hemingway said, is good for you. It's a societal good, because we're bringing to you things you otherwise probably wouldn't have access to. We're bringing you the animal kingdom at its finest. There's so much to learn about animals. Just being around them in that kind of setting and seeing their personalities, and that they're more than what we love to contrive. They're much more. They have personalities. And that's what I learned there. And we also have the wonder of bringing just so many different nations and cultures and languages to you, that you get to meet up close and personal, and you get to see how wonderfully different this world is, and how even in those differences, there's this extraordinary commonality that goes along with it. That we definitely enjoy, because, a lot of people don't realize circuses operate a bit different than your regular touring shows, in that we're literally a community. At least with Ringling Bros, we traveled and lived on a mile-long circus train. So we had a city without a zip code. It had a food court, a whole bit, we weren't just going to perform at the particular venue. We were going home, living with each other, barbecuing. It was like we were just going back into town, and that's what we do. It was our society, and we were bringing that society to every other society. And I think that, to me, was the biggest joy of it, was that we were pumping our brand of joy into the world. And there's no way in the world you could come to Ringling Brothers Barnum Bailey show and not be happy and not be lifted afterwards. After all, we're serving you bad food too, cotton candy and popcorn or what have you. Good Lord. It's like, and your imagination is taken to places you could never conceive. That's a wonderful, wonderful way, I think, to spend your life, giving people that. As Barnum said, the noblest art of all is making other people happy.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And Jonathan, I'm curious too, as far as your perspective or what the conversations were like with your coworkers, with your community that you were living with and traveling with, as you were able to see I would say the evolving trends in perceptions that, ultimately led to, a lot of backlash, and part of the reason for, for the decline as well, being so conflicting with everything that you were seeing internally, as far as just with, with everything, with, like you said, the animals have a personality, and everything with that. What was that like being, I would say, on the inside of that, and for you, and like I said, in your community?
I think I love the question because it's something I think all of us go through at some point, right? I think there's nothing more offensive than you live in this house. You know what goes on in this house. You know how things operate in this house. And there's some person who just walks outside your house and just walks around and just makes up stuff and starts pointing at its house and saying, they're eating children or something. I mean, just making up things. And at first it's funny. First you're kind of like, that's strange. But it becomes dangerous when a crowd starts gathering and starts believing it. And all of a sudden you have a crowd out there saying the same thing. You're going, wait a minute, you all have actually been here. Like you visited. I mean, that's what, so you never can underestimate the power of propaganda. I can tell you, it was always, to me, it was always an unfair fight, because if you understand this, especially with regards to animals and animal training, a true and dedicated and good animal trainer doesn't have days off. They don't and they're not rich. This is something that they are. And that, to me, is what makes circus most special, is nobody's doing that because, well, I just couldn't make it somewhere else. Everybody there, from the crew member to the ringmaster, whoever you are, you're literally there because either the circus called to you or you ran away and did it, and there's something about it that causes you to be so impassioned about what you do that you are willing to give up everything else and comforts or what have you. And that's what happens in that society, especially with animal trainers. I mean, those animals need your consistency. And, to hear many of the vicious things that would be said about them really took me aback. And so I would use my voice as ringmaster to defend as much as possible. I would write civic leaders. I would write elected officials who were thinking about signing some ordinance of something they didn't know about, but it just sounded politically expedient, and which I thought was intellectually cowardly, and I thought it was just grotesque and offensive, because you wouldn't do that with any other, even if half the stuff was true. Let's just say that we do have some bad apples. I mean, that's what we say with law enforcement. We have some bad apples, right? I mean, forget the casualties, or we have some, so fine, let's go with that argument. And not, if you go to any elected official and say, okay, well, let's disband the police, they wouldn't think about it. It wouldn't cross their minds because it's not politically expedient to do so. But circuses are generally family-owned operations. They're really small businesses. And usually they don't have what it takes to fight back. And a lot of these organizations that are the critics and the bullies of this stuff, they're very well funded, heavily well funded. And so it doesn't matter what they say. They have enough to keep going and going. Like, literally, they'll take people to court. And even in the courts where they'll say this is a frivolous thing, they've done it enough to the point where the show goes under because they're broken from court fees and all this stuff. I mean, it's a hard life to be in. People don't go into it to get rich. You go into it because you love it. This is a part of you. It's a part of who you are. And so if you can imagine somebody's telling you what you are is just this vile offense. And what makes it even more grotesque is that they have no evidence of it. They just make it up. And so we have now the very word circus is actually used as this vile thing to describe chaos and disorder, which is strange when you consider that it was Ringling Brothers who taught the US military logistics. You know, I mean, we know how to keep order in this madness. We know what to do. You have to, or people might die. You know, so it's one of these things where I've taken it to where I think what it has to do with is, I think it's so strange for people to see the very things that they give lip service to actually working. The fact that you have all of these people of so many different backgrounds who, for whatever reasons, they take all their different unique talents and abilities, and they put it into this beautiful pot called circus, this circle, and they just make it work. And they make it work. And really, it's a testament, it's a template, if you will, for the rest of us. Like, we can make this thing called life work. We, you know, it doesn't political, all this stuff. There are commonalities. If we get to the commonality for the circus is the show. Mm-hmm. We want this show to be the most amazing thing for you. I wish our politicians would understand that with regards to the country. Commonality is the country, not your own hideous little ideology. It's about the what works best for the country. Okay, let's get to there. We can kill each other later. I'm not saying circus people always get along. There are people who I don't care to see anymore. But if you say, hey, if we're going to get from point A to point B in this show, some of those people I say, yeah, you got to get that guy. You know, that's how we work. We understand that the end goal is always the show. And I wish more people would understand that. Get your end goal. The end goal is really the whole, not just your own self-interest. And I think that's a lesson, not only for nations, I think it's a lesson for families. I think it's, you know, for institutions anywhere and everywhere.
Yeah. So I'll be writing in your name in the 2024 ballot for president, just so you know. I'm on board. I'll be your campaign manager. But I do want to shift a little bit because we've been talking a lot about Ringling, but there's another circus in town, if you will, Omnium, that you are the, are you a ringmaster for them as well?
Yes, I am. I'm the ringmaster for Omnium, a bold new circus, omniumcircus.org. Thank you for mentioning them. We, you know, it's the dream trial of a wonderful circus veteran by the name of Lisa B. Lewis, who's always used her particular, her gifts in circus to really serve the underprivileged, the audiences that not necessarily would be able to maybe afford a circus, or even, you know, just aren't able to do it because of infirmities. You know, she has a very big heart and a very big imagination with regards to how we can broaden the tent. And not only, and the beauty of Omnium is we're not doing this tokenized way of bringing more talents in, but the real mission is to normalize us seeing, whether it's multiracial, whether it's multi-abled body, whatever it may be, normalize us seeing them at their highest level. You know, when you see Jennifer Bricker Bauer, you know, this woman's born with no legs, and you see her aerial routine, you're blown away. Her backstory is extraordinary. It's like, I mean, she's one of these people, I tell her all the time, I said, I hate talking to you because I don't have any excuses in my life. You know, like, she's just one of those people, like, I'd hate to have her as a coach in anything, man, because it's like, what are you going to say? She literally grew up in a home where they like normalized who she was, and they told her, you can't, you're not allowed to say can't. She grew up like that. So she just grew up with this And that's what she's bringing to this tent, along with so many others. I mean, and one of the other things we have, obviously, we have sign language and all those things. We want to, it's multisensory. The idea is to really get us all on board to truly, not just diversity, but what inclusion actually looks like, where people aren't asking you for anything. They're just asking for a chance. And that to me has always been the magic of circus. It's like, okay, if you, what do you bring? What do you bring? What do you bring here that's going to enhance this thing we do? And that's really what we're just expanding what it means. I mean, we've always had different types of bodies in circus one way or the other. There's a wonderful circus, I think in the UK, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's literally called Extraordinary Bodies. And their circus focuses on those we would consider disabled. I'm always careful with that word because, I mean, you see these folks perform and it's like, well, who's disabled? You know, it's like, I mean, are you kidding? And so we have just that whole, what we're really doing is really celebrating the depth and breadth of the human family in all its incarnations at Omnium, and thus the name. And so it's really an exciting venture. It's a non-for-profit. So we need your money, please. It's great because we have a lot of ambitions. There are many things we want to do. We want to continue our work in reaching children in children's hospitals and after school programs and library programs. You know, we're going to have a virtual component that we'll continue with, as well as our live show we're looking to really put up. And we're actually in the midst of raising money to put that up as well. So we want to, as the name says, Omnium, we kind of want to be everywhere. But we really want to push that mission of really just exposing children of all ages to the best of themselves, whatever package that they come in. And I think the ultimate goal is that we get to a place in our society where we're not looking at people like, you know, oh, that's kind of, we're just going, okay, well, what do they bring? Where it just becomes normal. I mean, when I was in Ringling Brothers, I'll tell you, with myself, it's so interesting because my final 7 years was I was working alongside this amazing artist named Paulo dos Santos from Brazil, and he's a little person. And my only objection when I was coming back, I was like, man, I don't want to be partnering with anybody. That was my thing. And what is it, man, this guy, what is he going to do? What is he going to do? There's a little guy next to me. He's not going to be able to do anything. Yeah, okay. This dude is like, he's a master capoeira martial artist, right? And so he's literally a badass. One of the sweetest human beings you'll ever meet, real gentleman, cool personality, extraordinary performer, strong as a beast. He would actually pick me up on his shoulders. And I'm like 6'5", 250 or something. He would pick me up on his shoulders and squat and spin me around. Kids would fall out, man. They would just, oh my goodness, couldn't believe it. He's literally, in my opinion, he's the best athlete on the show. He could just get his body to do anything. And one of the wonderful things I learned from him was resilience. I mean, all the stuff he had to go through just to learn his craft. I mean, it's a beautiful story. But it really helped me shed my own particular prejudice, and my particular assumptions, especially when he and I would go out and we would do lectures at different schools about bullying. Bullying was this big thing. So we said, hey, I think we can go out there. And I knew his story. I said, he would be great. Now, English is like his third language. And he's not shy to be in front of people. And I tell you, he would have these kids in the palm of his hand when he'd go and he'd tell them his story. I mean, you see kids crying, and the kids, for some reason, would open up to us about certain things they were going through because they saw him. Because I always thought, man, it's such a difference. Most of us grow out of the thing we're bullied about. You may lose the weight, the pimples may go away, you may get smarter or what have you. You lose the braces, but what happens if your thing is that's it? You're going to be this. And for him to stand in front of those kids and do that was just a remarkable thing, because here he is being successful, flourishing, confident, And I think it just did wonders for the kids we met with. So in many respects, that's the spirit we're carrying with this new venture, Omnium, a bold new circus. And we just can't wait to bring it to you in a live form under our big tent and welcome you under the big tent. And we want to continue to bring you offerings virtually as well.
What I think is so amazing about this is that the mission that drives the entertainment has this impact that lasts so much longer than the time that you have your audience captivated within your realm, or whether you're out and speaking in schools and things like that. And wondering if you could talk about it from that standpoint of what you experienced as Ringmaster for Ringling, and then as well with Omnium as well, how that mission continues to go beyond, and I would say kind of weave into their lives once they're already home, once they're back into their regular routine, to see that change and that inspiration and improvement in the lives of your audience.
It's the ultimate privilege. It's when you realize all that work you go through and all the frustrations, that's why you do it. And that's the part of the ring, the circus ring, that is the most sacred, is that it got passed along. And I'm convinced that, I'm never going to hear from or meet the majority of the people we've touched, which is fine. The point is to touch them and to, I've been privileged though to hear from various people. And you realize how precious time is, because, I heard from people who, they're now in college. And I received letters out of nowhere, and it's always at the right time. I remember receiving one from a young man, and I remembered when I wrote him, when he was detailing what I wrote him. I said, "Oh my goodness, I remember writing this kid." And he's in college now, and he said, he said, "Sir, I have your letter framed on my wall, and I always refer to it when I'm feeling a little discouraged and I'm not too sure." He said, "I remember you told me to make sure, to keep expanding my imagination and that I could do anything, and to always keep reading and stuff like that." It's like, man, this is wild. But he grew up on my voice. I recently received a letter from a young man. He actually posted it on his social media account. And I think he does public speaking or something. He said, "If you want to know why I'm so good at this," he had a picture of me. And he said, "This is the guy." He said, "I was that kid who I hung on every word of his." And I mean, he taught me, he said, and he made mention of the fact, he said, "Here I am, this young Black kid with this ambition, and I didn't have any models. And then I go to the circus and there it is. This is the guy. He's in charge of all of this. And he's so eloquent." And he's like, that's my model. And I was like, this is wild to me. I mean, you just don't know. I've had mothers come up to me crying, saying how much they needed their children to come see me. I met this wonderful lady in Jacksonville with her two sons, and they were having too good of a time at the show. I'll never forget it. And I was like, man, I got to meet these people, because everything impressed them. Everything impressed them. And I went over, and they were in the front row, and I mean, I barely got over there, and they enveloped me in a hug. And the mother, lovely lady, she said, "You got to know how," she said, "you have no idea how important this show is to us. We have to come every year because, my son over here, he was dressed like a ringmaster. Her other son was dressed like a clown." She said, "The one that's dressed like a ringmaster," she said, "he's autistic." She said, I mean, how do you know? How do you tell?" But she said, "He's autistic." He said, "His first words were uttered here at a Ringling show." She's like, he didn't speak for the first 4 years of his life. And when I brought him to the show, he finally opened his mouth and he spoke. And she said, "That's why we come every year. We have to come every year." So of course, when the show was closing, I didn't think of myself, "Oh man, what are we going to do for work?" or whatever. All I thought about was, man, there are people with that kind of connection to this. And I've been fortunate. I've been really, really blessed to actually in real time meet some of the people, and they've thrown some impactful stuff, because I'm thinking I may have said something, just in passing. It was this one little girl, I used to have braces growing up. So when I would meet kids with braces, I could see they're a little shy to do the kind of half smile. And so I throw some out and say, hey, you're going to be, hey, you have braces? You'll be as good looking as a ringmaster when you grow up. Stuff like that. I throw stuff like that. Well, years later, I meet this girl's father, comes up to me, I mean, wiping his eyes going, you have no idea what you did for my daughter. And I'm going, what? He said, when you told her that, she was so shy, she wouldn't talk to nothing. She wouldn't do, he said, now she's studying theater. She's in a master's program. That's what she wanted to do. She just started opening up after she met you. And to me, I'm like, goodness, I'm thinking this little thing I said was just to cheer a kid up. I wasn't thinking it was going to change the trajectory of their life. And that's something I think is so vital for performing artists to understand. Of every stripe, you're not in this for yourself. And if you are, you're a failure. I don't care how much money you make or how much hardware you get. If at the end of the day, there's nobody who can point to you and go, that saved my life, that did something for me, or I got this out of that. I mean, and I'm not only performing artists, I think in anything. I mean, the world is round, man. Evolution is real. It's got to keep going. And so the whole purpose of your life is to literally it's to create a steep standard, right? It's to create a steep standard for the next one. For the next one, you should want the guy coming after you to be better or to be inspired in some way. And I'm always amused how, my one thing, all I wanted to do was be an opera singer. I didn't know that would inspire this kid over here to be a speaker, or this kid over here to go and do whatever they're going to do, or this one to go into theater, what have you. It's just amazing how it just moves people to think broader, and that's what I encourage, and that's why I think I'm really hard about, and I'm hard on myself about it, is to remember to do your thing. Remember to do whatever God assigned you. Do that, do that. And this has been corroborated by none other than P.T. Barnum. My favorite quote by P.T. Barnum is this: unless a man enters upon the vocation intended for him by nature and suited to his peculiar genius, he cannot succeed. That hits me like a ton of bricks every time I think about it, because it's so true. You hear about these billionaires and millionaires. Everything is all about, who's got the swag. And so many people who are just unhappy with themselves. You could have all that stuff and not be successful because you're not really doing what it is you're supposed to be doing. I mean, we're here by design. And until you align yourself with what it is you're really about, you'll always truly be poor in that sense, because what it is you're here for is supposed to sprout out and feed others. That's the end goal of it. And you're going to be fulfilled. I mean, I used to step on the arena floor every day, even when I had a crappy day, which I wouldn't complain about because my workplace was a circus, for God's sakes, but I literally would stand there sometimes and go, this is what I do for a living. Like, this is what I do for, like, I get to play. Like, my coworkers can fly and do daring things, and they think I have this incredible. I mean, I had coworkers. If you hear them talk about me and my, you think I came out of the heavens or something. And we laugh at each other. I have a wonderful friend. She and I are buddies till this day. She was the first person I met when I got to Ringling. She's she's very short. We would joke about it, and she's from Russia. And I remember when she didn't know a lick of English. Obviously, I didn't know any Russian, but we communicated some way. And as our friendship grew and we learned to really talk to each other, we had so much in common. It was so amazing. We had so much in common because she was really brilliant at what she did. And she would ask me, because she loved my singing, she loved my voice, and she would ask me, she said, how you get so good? Because I can't do that. How you get so good? I said, my teachers were mean. I had these mean grades. She said, mine too. Oh my. And we would trade these little war stories, and we saw the commonality in it. And that to me is like, it was like, that to me surmised what the joy of what I was doing, that I was this fortunate to be around these types of people, good, bad, and ugly, and to have this life, and to know that out of this life, other people's lives were being inspired and touched and moved in ways and I still, I'll probably never know until I get to eternity or something, how far it reached. And I'm glad to be that God uses me as his conduit in that respect. And so that's my hope for everyone. Let God use you as a conduit and do the thing that is burning in you. As the great James Baldwin said, go the way your blood beats, go the way your blood beats. And if you go the way your blood beats, everything will fall into place.
Well, Jonathan, so many great messages in there, and you've been inspiring to me, and I hope our listeners as well. And I don't know Barbara Walters, but I can tell why she would think you're one of the most fascinating people ever in the world. So, thank you so much for your time today, Jonathan. If people want to know more about you or Omnium, where would you send them?
Well, if you want to know about Omnium, please visit omniumcircus.org. That's omniumcircus.org. You can find me practically anywhere in the social media sphere at Last Ringmaster. It's my handle for Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, whatever else they drag me into. I'm also at bigtopvoice.com. Bigtopvoice.com, one word.
Excellent. Jonathan Lee Iverson, the Last Ringmaster with an asterisk.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us here on the Attraction Pros podcast. This was just so much fun to be able to have the opportunity to talk to you. Like Matt said, so incredibly inspiring. So just really important messages right there. So thank you. And for everyone out there who is watching and listening, just remember, we are all Attraction Pros.
Thanks for listening to the Attraction Pros podcast.
Make sure to subscribe so you can tune in when new episodes release. And even better, please leave us a review on iTunes.
For more information, visit AttractionPros.com.